Welcome to Smarter Strategic Thinking, where we invite industry leaders into our podcast to discuss everyday IT infrastructure solutions that businesses face on a daily basis. My name's Ray Quattramini. I have 41 years experience selling IT infrastructure solutions from tape to disc to optical across the globe. If you like us, give us a thumbs up or give us a thumbs down, depends how you are. If you want to follow us, we're going to have quite a lot in these series, and thank you for joining. On today's podcast, we've invited Ian Hamilton, who I've known for 30 years, and he worked for a tape drive company in Reading doing repairs, and I met because I sold him some spare parts. Today, Ian works for Insurgo, a world leader in tape erasing technology and tape repurposing technology. Ian's here to discuss his products and his technology that could help your business today. Share your story behind Insurgo, its founding, where you're based, and how it evolved into a global leader of tape data management.
Sure. Thanks, Ray. And thanks for having me today. I really appreciate that. We're based in a small town in Wales, South Wales, called Abertillery. And it's quite interesting is Abertillery is kind of the UK home for tape media. So back in the 70s and 80s, there was a plant there that was actually manufacturing tape media. So you might remember Graham Magnetics,
yes,
Anacom, those kind of guys. That tape was all manufactured in Abertillery for the European market. That was an American business, and it transformed, and buyouts, etc., etc. And sadly, it ended in the kind of 2000s, early 2000s. So Insurgo was kind of founded off the back of that. Eventually started as a tape media supplier, and then we progressed into the data destruction side of things. So the highly secure arrays of tape media, and also migration as well. So migrating from one tape format to another, or from tape to cloud, or from tape to disk. Been around since 2009, right. When the company was first founded. But in that location, there's just a plethora of talent and knowledge around tape, which is been really, really good for us. So we've managed to pool all of that experience together, and I think we worked out the other day that we've got about 450 years of experience. So it's an impressive business.
Wow. And is it a private company?
It is a private company, yeah. So there are two main organisations within the Insurgo group. We've got Insurgo Media Services, which handle traceability and the secure erasure of tape media, as well as the sustainable destruction of that media. And then we've got another business called IDATS, which focuses on media migration. Right. So migrating from tape to another tape, to disk, to cloud.
Okay, so Insurgo have a patented technology. What makes your product different to traditional degaussing and shredding of tape media?
Well, that's a great question. So, interestingly, with LTO technology, let's use LTO as an example. That's the current technology that people are mostly using for tape. We're now on generation 9. We started with generation 1, right? Yeah. LTO. We remember when that came out. As that technology's got more and more advanced, there's more and more data on that tape. So physically within a square inch of tape, you've got far more data per square inch with LTO 9.
Yep.
Unimaginable difference than you did with LTO 1. So if you've got a degausser that you purchased back in LTO 1 days, it's not going to have the magnetic power to degauss a later technology of LTO, and that's something that people often forget. There's also a very specific way of degaussing tape media using a degausser. So you actually need to move the tape across the degaussing bed in various different ways, using various different motions to ensure that all of the data is erased. The challenge with that is when you've got organizations which are mainly ITADs, they don't really understand data. They don't understand the significance of that data on that tape. They don't understand how important that is in terms of regulatory compliance or GDPR. Yeah. So that process kind of gets sped up and doesn't happen correctly. The alternative, and some organizations use the two together, is then shredding the tape. So putting it through a huge shredder, as you would do a disc or any other component. The challenge with tape is that although the physical cassette is rigid plastic, the actual spool of tape, very, very pliable. It's very, very flexible. Put it on the palm of your hand, a little blow and it's gone. What happens when you put it through a shredder is it doesn't get chopped up into the small little pieces that you would assume it does. The plastic does, but the actual tape itself ends up getting wrapped around the gears, snaps rather than gets cut, and you're left with strips of tape. And that could be anything from, a couple of feet to, 10, 13 centimeters. But the interesting thing is that if you look at LTO9, 10 centimeters of LTO9 tape, it's got about 12 gig on it. So you've got a full HD movie's worth of data on there.
And some.
Yeah. So put that into the context of it being numerical data or being, financial data or, personal data. You could get a county's worth of personal bank details.
Absolutely.
On that amount of tape. So it's really important that, the data is gone, is erased completely. So with our technology, we've got some very clever patented technology which enables us to erase that data completely from the tape. Not only erase the data from the tape, but also erase the data that's on the CM chip. So every LTO cartridge and IBM TS cartridge will have an RF chip within it. And that RF chip is used, or its purpose was to store things like mount counts. So how many times that tape has been in a drive, how old that tape is, when it was created, when it was last used, etc., etc. With backup application software manufacturers, they also decided to use that to store some information that would help with the recovery and the performance of that backup.
Yeah.
And that can be things like an IP address, a name of a server. It can even be a company name. So there are instances where we've had tapes come into us which have supposedly been through the degaussing process, and actually the data's still there, and we can read on the chip
what the contents are.
Well, and more importantly, whose it belongs to. So, the challenge with that is if let's say you're a bank or a financial institution heavily regulated when it comes to data storage, if I can prove that there's still data on that tape, that's deemed as being lost.
Yeah.
So the regulator will say you've lost data, potentially customers' information, so we're going to fine you.
Yeah.
And it's no small fine. It's no secret that British Airways got fined about £20 million because they lost a hard drive. Now, the original fine was about 170 million and it was reduced to 20 million, but that's huge. So the challenge is to make sure that data is completely erased. So we also erase that CM chip as well, so that you can't see the data on the tape. It's physically gone. It's not been written over. It's gone. And also that CM chip data has gone as well. And we've had that tried and tested. So we've had, for a large financial institution, they wanted the reassurance that this had been done. So we worked with Fujifilm and we sent some tapes down to Fuji in Japan and in Germany, and they tested it and came back and said absolutely no data left on this media. IBM have tested it. They've come to the same conclusion. And we've also had independent testings as well. So we've had a university in Wales, which has tested that method, and they've deemed it as what they call level 5.
Right.
And level 5 means that if you've got a government with unlimited resources and unlimited finances to try and retrieve that data, they're not going to be able to, because there's absolutely nothing left. So very, very secure. So it's peace of mind. And the thing is as well, it's the same cost as just getting it shredded. So why wouldn't you do that?
Absolutely. And this is your own patented technology.
That's correct. Yeah.
You've got a patent on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the guys in the labs back in Abertillery worked, for many years on this to make sure this technology was precise, was enabled. It's very, very good. And we've also got the ability to be really precise on what we erase. So if we've got an organization that wants to send in media that is not regulated, or let's say there's nothing on there which is secure. So it could be, let's say, a broadcaster, for instance, that's just got old footage on there that's available for streaming. It's available on YouTube. There's no security issues around that. We can actually repurpose that tape. So we can remove the data from the CM chip and have that as new. And then we can also remove all of the data from the tape, but leave the servo tracks in place.
Right.
So that means it's effectively a new tape. So that can go back into the circular economy, and that's a great way of recycling and a great way of increasing your sustainability.
So I know, but for our viewers, do you want to explain what a servo track is in tape?
So servo track effectively tells the tape drive or the head where the edges of the tape are, so it doesn't overwrite onto that. So it keeps the tape precisely on the track of the head to make sure that it doesn't go off. So if you remember back in the old days where we had VCRs,
remember them,
and you remember the tracking, so you'd record something on your VCR, you'd take it to a friend's, watch it there, and you'd have to set the tracking,
fuzzy lines or whatever.
Exactly that. So basically the servo track just enables it to keep maintaining it. And of course with data, it's even more critical than with footage. Back in those days we had no HD. It's kind of it was fairly basic.
You and I have obviously been in the tape industry for decades. And it's obviously been in decline. People are always putting it down and dishing it out. It's gone, it's history. We're going to use the cloud. We're going to use local disk, et cetera, et cetera. So where do you see tape in its future?
So it's interesting. I mean, like you say, you and I have been in this game a long time, right? 35 years for me. So, been in it forever. And for the last 25 years, I've heard the phrase tape is dead. And here we are. It's not going anywhere. Tape's got a great history, a real rich history. And, if you look at it, it started off with, open reel. Okay. And this is kind of before information technology or IT, when it was computing. And on that tape would be effectively a list of commands, right? Process control, open this sluice gate. It gets to this temperature, et cetera, et cetera. So it kind of moved from primary storage, and then kind of towards the 80s and the 90s, it moved into backup. So great medium for backup, right? It still remains the only removable media, which is perfect for air gaps. If it's not in a library or not in a tape drive, it can't be read, it can't be got at. It's useless to a hacker. So it really found its way there. As disk kind of became cheaper and cheaper, restore times from disks are quicker because it doesn't need to retrieve the tape. So a lot of people moved over to disk, but tape's still relevant for that air gap. So what you've got now on the kind of backup side of things is you've got people using tape just to make sure that their data or their backups cannot be accessed. It's completely offline. What we've also seen in the kind of 2000s is tape move on to an archive format. And that's quite interesting because what you're seeing now is you're not necessarily seeing a decline in tape. It's just moved, and it's moved away from the end user. It now sits with the hyperscalers. Okay. So when you're looking at backup, people say, well, we don't use tape anymore. We back up to the cloud. It's going to be on tape. It's just someone else's tape. And you've got organizations that have sprung up that are offering tape as a service now. And then if you look at things like broadcast, media entertainment, and
data interchange.
Absolutely. High performance computing. For those guys, they're producing a massive amount of content or data. Okay, especially some of these research organizations and research universities. To have that spinning on disk just isn't economically viable.
No.
The power, the environmentals that you've got to have in place, all consume a massive amount of energy. So tape is the obvious choice for that. And with the advent of S3, which is the protocol that we use to put data into the cloud, with the advent of that, you've now got the ability to have tape as like a nearline storage pool. So it's now become part of a workflow. So as part of the workflow, we've now got fast disk or SSD. We've now got slower disk for maybe medium retention, and then we're moving on to tape for long-term retention. But that data on tape is now as accessible to the user as it is if it was on disk.
Yes.
So that's the real game changer. So tape isn't dead. It's far from it. It's still growing, and it's now moved away from, like I say, end users domain into a hyperscaler's domain. And you can see that with the tape library manufacturers, the likes of Quantum, Spectra, IBM, BDT. They've all made libraries which are specific for hyperscalers now.
Yes.
And the hyperscalers are just interested in low cost storage, which is what tape provides.
Yes.
So, if I'm not going to be accessing that data for the next year, 6 months, 3 months, whatever, put it onto tape, because as a hyperscaler, it's costing me less and less and less to do that.
Yeah. And the energy savings.
Exactly. Yeah. So, a tape itself is only consuming power when it's being written to or read.
Yes.
As soon as it's out of that tape drive and back in its slot, very much like a jukebox, it's not consuming any power. So the cost savings are, huge, absolutely huge.
So that brings us on to environmental sustainability. Recycling end-of-life tape has significantly reduced CO2 emissions. This is something that Insurgo provides. How does Insurgo balance robust data security with environmental responsibility?
Sure. So we take that really quite seriously, and it's actually been an eye-opener for me. When I joined Insurgo, and I'd known Insurgo for a number of years, and I'd seen what they'd done. I've always been really, really, and having a tape background, when you see a company in the UK that's doing this stuff, especially with the patented head technology we've got, incredible. And one of the things that really, really surprised me was how serious it takes the environmental impact of this. So we go through quite a rigorous routine of ensuring that the process that we carry out is as sustainable as it can possibly be. So the highest sustainability you can achieve is if you're going to reuse that tape.
Yeah.
So if a customer is happy for that tape to go back into the circular economy, that's brilliant. We are about 99% more efficient than if you were to shred that tape.
Wow.
All right. If we are going to destroy that tape at the end of the process, then again, let's take LTO for an example. We would physically dismantle that tape, each tape.
Wow.
We put plastic in for recycling, and we put the metal, like cogs and springs, in for recycling as well. Interesting thing is that, and again, this is something I didn't know until I joined Insurgo, is that it's actually really difficult to recycle plastic. So if you've got a colour plastic, it's always going to remain that colour.
Yeah.
So you've got to find someone that wants that type of plastic and doesn't care about the colour, because each generation of LTO cartridge has been a different colour.
Yeah, yeah.
So we've actually found an organisation that will take it, and effectively they remold it into sleeves that fit round reels of steel cable.
Wow.
Because they don't care what colour it is, which is great. The metal goes off to recycling. The actual tape itself, you can't landfill that because of its chemical composite.
Yeah.
Not good at all. So the only option you've really got is incineration. However, when we incinerate this goes to a waste to energy plant. So the heat that's generated from that creates electricity. The ash that's left at the bottom of that process then goes into manufacturing house bricks.
Wow. So
at this current time, it's as sustainable as you can possibly get. And that's about 51%. And again, this has been research that we've had a university look into.
Yeah.
We use 51% less CO2 than if you were to shred it. But we don't stop there. So we're continually looking at ways to make this even more sustainable.
Yeah.
and predominantly remove the need to incinerate that tape spool, whether it's waste of energy or not. We still don't want to do that. So we've got university looking at ways to turn that tape into something else that could be reused, and it could be a pallet tie, it could be maybe spooling it for a 3D printer, whatever.
Right, yeah.
We're just looking at ways to make that
to repurpose.
Absolutely. So effectively nothing goes into incineration or landfill. That's where we want to get to.
Wow. So going back to our archiving question, addressing legacy data, how does Insurgo mitigate the risk of archive data that you receive that needs to be completely destroyed or got rid of?
Fantastic question. Absolutely fantastic. So again, we've got some homegrown patented technology all around the traceability of that media. So, for instance, if we've got someone that's got 10,000 tapes that they want to get destroyed, they would send us a manifest with each barcode label for each tape that they want destroyed. We've built some scanners, and those scanners enable us to read the barcode, and marry that with their manifest. But not only that, it will read the ID of the CM chip in the tape and also the serial number of the tape.
Okay.
So we've now got 3 ways of tracing each tape that comes into us. And the reason we do that is, firstly, barcode labels, if it's an old bit of media, they do come off. So we still need to be able to trace that if a label does come off, get stuck to someone's shoe, can't find the etc. It also prevents us from destroying and erasing media that we shouldn't.
Right.
So, i.e., if a customer sends 10,000 tapes and 5 of those tapes aren't on the manifest, when we scan that tape, it will say, I'm not on the manifest. If for some reason that process gets missed and it gets put into one of our erasure drives, because our erasure drive and the scanner is talking to our Investigo software, it will just spit the tape out. It won't let us physically erase that tape.
Wow.
And we've actually had a number of customers where we've ended up putting tapes into quarantine. I'm literally just about to phone them, and the phones rang, and they've said, "Oh God, I hope you haven't destroyed these tapes." Yeah, absolutely,
absolutely.
We've been really pleased to say no, we haven't. They're in quarantine. They won't get destroyed. So there's lots of mechanisms in place to make sure that we don't erase data that customers sent us by mistake, and secondly, at the end of that process as well, those tapes get scanned on the way out.
Right.
So we've also got it documented that this tape has been erased. Okay. And that whole process, we can then provide the customer with documentation on every single tape that's been through that process.
Yeah.
It will give you the type of tape it is. It will give you the original manufacturer, who's branded the tape, the serial number, the CMID, etc., even mount counts.
Wow.
How many mounts that tape did. And with that, and with a destruction certificate, and with a sustainability certificate, customers 100% covered. And the other thing as well is that with that sustainability certificate, they can also use that for their ESG, right? Yeah. So that can, in turn, provide them and provide their regulators or their sustainability
compliance,
champion the ability to see that this stuff has been disposed of correctly.
What are the key considerations you should consider using tape and developing a data management strategy moving forwards as a business?
So I think you've got to look at and understand, the purpose of that data.
Yeah.
So is that data important? How important it is? When's it going to be retrieved? How often is it going to be retrieved? And then you need to kind of almost have a tiered approach for this as well. So, we kind of touched on this earlier, where your backup retention policy might be 30 days for a fast restore. Right? Yeah. And there's plenty of appliances out there that do that. Anything after that, you really want to tear down, and you want to make sure that that data, the less important it becomes, the cheaper it becomes.
Yeah.
So you need to work it down onto, tape eventually, because tape is going to be by far the lowest cost of storage
out of anything
that you can have. Absolutely, out of anything. But it also going to give you that air gap.
Yeah.
So it's going to ensure that that can't be accessed, that can't be hacked, it can't be encrypted by the outside world. And the advice is always, have 2 copies of that. If you can, have another library in a different location, or at least have 2 copies in the library and one that you vault. I think that's really important. And also understanding whether that data is for backup or is it archive. And sometimes there's a misinterpretation around that. Backup is backup, right? So backup is your monthly, your incremental,
your daily,
exactly. And archive is not a backup. Archive is data that you rarely touch, but you still need access to it.
Yeah. So it could be a month's financial records kept for 5 years or whatever. Regulatory, we have to keep records for 7 years.
Yeah.
Depending on the industry.
Yeah. So if you're going to keep it for 7 years, the chances are you're only going to be asked to produce that data if there's
an incident,
an issue or an incident,
or a policy.
Exactly. So that could go onto tape. But if it's your backup and someone's going to ask you for an email that they deleted yesterday, then that's where you want to have your your 30-day retention and be bringing that back from that 30-day backup.
Yeah. We all know that tape has been, people have feared tape, and for the first few years of LTO had some problems, not just because of the tape technology, but also because of the backup software. Vendors had some issues and writing to LTO tape. But personally now, and you probably feel the same, is LTO is a very mature technology.
Absolutely.
The backup software has come on leaps and bounds in terms of how it handles tape, what you can put on tape. And also, we ourselves have seen people moving more towards tape for archiving. And one of the big things that customers aren't aware of is how long it takes data to come back off tape. So, when a tape's running at high speed, it's just as fast as a hard disk, if not faster.
Yeah.
If not faster. And so if you find a tape that's not in a library, typically, once you load that tape in a library, it's no more than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So you've had a tape on the shelf for 10 years, and it's going to take you 2 minutes to recover that archive. Is that really a big thing?
Exactly that. Yeah, and that's where you've got to weigh up cost over performance, right? Ultimately, if you've had that data on a tape and you've not accessed it in that period of time, that will have consumed no energy.
Yeah.
Because that will be in a slot in the tape library. And if the tape library is not being used, it's going to be on standby, which reduces the cost even more. And you're absolutely right. No less, and I think it's about 1 minute 17 or something like that.
It's crazy.
So access time isn't a challenge. And we touched earlier about being able to have S3 objects on tape, the user being able to access that. But with the software that's around today, if I want my expenses back from 2019, which I'm probably never going to want, so that's a great candidate.
Yeah.
But it's financial, so it needs to be kept. But it's a great candidate for archiving. If I do want to get that back, I get a notification to say it's on its way.
Yeah.
Right. And I can sit and wait. At the end of the day, it's not overly important. And I think that, if you're looking at, as we touched earlier, some of these research organizations, huge amounts of data, and they may run experiments that create petabytes of data, but realistically, they're probably not going to come around to analyzing that data for at least 6 months, maybe a year.
Maybe longer, yeah.
Maybe longer. And that's a real candidate for archiving, and that archiving is on tape. And it's not like the old HSM days where, moving it down the tiers was great. Getting it back was a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's not like that anymore.
No.
It's very much near line and very much part of that whole workflow now.
One of the things that strikes me about tape as a technology is how robust it is. Okay, we look at the cost and everything else, and we've been involved, Fortuna's been involved in a lot of data archiving projects, and putting a tape library in place does free up your expensive tier 1 storage, whether it's NVMe arrays, SSD arrays, disk arrays. And putting that in place, you're actually long term, you're saving quite a bit of money because you're not investing in tier 1 storage every time you fill up with a petabyte of storage, for example.
100%. And if you look at, I've worked for organizations in the past where we've done analysis on this, And actually, the amount of data that's on tier 1 storage that hasn't been touched in a year is 75%.
Wow.
So, I mean, that could be flash.
Yeah.
Right. So it really doesn't make sense to have it just sat on that very expensive tier 1 storage, because that's not cheap. And you can't just keep adding shelves and shelves and shelves of this stuff. Not only is it the power, the cooling, the expense of buying it, the support, but it's also the space it takes up in the data center as well, right?
Yeah.
You know, you could end up with racks and racks of stuff, and you could move 75% of that off and put it onto tape. It's there, it's ready, it's available. It's just not costing you an arm and a leg.
No. And one of the other things is that customers tend to forget is we all talk about backup.
Ooh.
Backup is like the buzzword. Archive is like the forgotten son. You know,
Yeah.
he sits in the background. He's there somewhere. We never really discuss it. But if we did move data to tape as an archive, you know, it's so cheap and so affordable. You know, and it does free up space. You know, and it also, one of the biggest benefits is you reduce your backup window massively, as you said, potentially 75%, 90%, depending on what it is. So with the so our RTO and RPO objectives from a business perspective against the DR, you know, we're recovering maybe a few terabytes rather than a few petabytes.
Yep,
so that again makes a big impact.
Yes, it does, absolutely. And touching on what you were saying earlier as well about, you know, the reliability of the LTO is phenomenal.
It is.
There are way less bit errors on tape than there are on disk.
Or SSD.
Or
NVMe.
Absolutely.
You know,
and I'd always challenge this as well, is, you know, when I've been sat in front of data center managers in the past, I've always asked them, how often do you need to replace a disk in your disk array? You know, and how often do you need to replace a tape drive?
Yeah.
You're going to get the answer you want. You know, if you're talking about tape. So yeah, very, very reliable. You know, LTO9 is very, very you know, dense. We're talking about 18 terabytes currently. That's uncompressed. LTO10, you're looking at 30 terabytes uncompressed. And let's not forget the compression, right? Because you know, that's going to give you at least double the capacity of that tape as well. So yeah, phenomenal.
Yeah, we all know LTO10 is on the horizon. It's a completely new tape technology. You know, it's got no backwards compatibility with LTO8, LTO9. Obviously, LTO9 can only read LTO8 tapes, whereas LTO10 is not going to be able to read any legacy data from any of those tapes. So Insurgo offer a service where you can take legacy tapes, LTO7, and transition them to LTO9. Absolutely. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, sure. So we can take legacy media, and we don't really care what's written that tape. So let's use, you know, a backup application, as that's probably what most people are going to understand. So let's say we've got a backup application that's written data to a tape. That application is going to write to that tape in a proprietary format. Yeah. Right. What we've got the ability to do is unwrap it from that proprietary format.
Okay.
And then present that data back in its original format.
Right.
So let's say you've got a tape, and this is real high level stuff, but let's say you've got a tape full of Word documents. Yeah. Right. That's written in a backup application. You know, you and I know you can't just click on that file and bring it back and open it up and work on it. So we've got the ability to unwrap that. So we now have all of those Word documents. That's a very simple way of describing it. Right. What we can then do is we can migrate that onto a later technology. So let's say someone's going from LTO7 or even LTO9 and they want to go to LTO10. We've got the ability to do that. So we can do that in a number of ways. We can move it into LTO10. Yeah. Okay. We can actually, as well, and this is a common question that comes up, is you got 18 terabytes on an LTO 9. You can have 30 terabytes on an LTO, or 30 is what 30 something 30-ish is what they're talking about on an LTO 10. We're not just going to put the 18 terabytes onto that LTO 10 and have lots of capacity wasted. We can actually buffer that all up.
Oh, okay.
And put it back into the application that they want. If they want to move away from that completely, start fresh, then we can you know, migrate that to wherever they want. Maybe they've got cloud, or we can even offer that as a restore as a service. So we can vault the tapes on site, and then we can restore that and present that data back to them as and when they want that data. So they may say, look, we're going to have a clean slate. We're going to move from LTO, we're going to move to LTO 10, but that whole transition is time consuming for us, etc. Whatever the reasons are, we can take those tapes, we can hold them, vault them, and then present that data back as and when. So we'll catalog it, index it. They understand what they've got on those tapes. They just ask for it, and we'll bring it back.
So the saying goes that you change your backup software less than you change your data center. Your tapes, most companies stick to their backup software for years. Maybe 10 years or more. But eventually somebody makes the decision, we're going to move from X to Y, and you can take that format and move it from X to Y.
Yes, that's right. And the reason we do that, and the reason customers want us to do that, is because the challenge with, and this is why people don't change backup vendor that often, is because what do they do
with their legacy data?
So let's I'm just two names. Let's say we've got Networker, or customers moving to Networker from Net Backup. Okay. What do you do with the Net Backup stuff? You've got to keep an instance of that to be able to retrieve the data. So what we're saying is you don't need to do that. You can cut that cost completely, right? You can stop paying your subscription, stop paying your license model, your support. We'll move that into Net Backup for you. And that's essentially what we do. So that's a really, really good question. So, and interestingly as well, is that on the tape side of things, when we're talking about, refreshing and upgrading and stuff like that, when it comes to tape as well, it's quite interesting. Again, when you sit in front of a data center manager or an IT manager and ask how long they've had that tape library, it's going to be 7-10 years. And that's real testament to how reliable this technology is. And how kind of unbreakable it is, really, because like I said earlier, we have the perception that people have moved away from tape. They haven't.
No.
Right? It's just now someone else's.
Well, the hyperscalers use it, as you said at the beginning. It's a perfect device for storing petabytes of data at the lowest possible cost.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm just going to go back to LTO 10 as a technology to finalize. Where do you see LTO 10 going?
So this is my opinion. All right. So this is just me looking at my 35 years and looking at the market where it is today, and looking at what the tape library vendors are doing. So as I mentioned earlier, we've now got, S3 object tape. The library manufacturers have positioned themselves into that market as well. So each library that I mentioned earlier, which is specifically designed for hyperscalers, will have that S3 object integrated in it already. It's very plug and play. And I think that because it's just about cost for the hyperscalers, they're not too worried about whether they migrate from LTO 9 to LTO 10, right? It is just, this is a pool of storage I've got. They really, I don't think, care what that technology is. It could be fabric, it could be DNA, it could be silica. They don't care, right? And I think that it's just a case of when that is full up, we'll buy another one. And by that time, if it's LTO 11, it's LTO 11.
Yes.
So they're not overly worried about that. And when you put S3 object into the mix, then you've got the ability of, being able to access that data and being able to potentially run that back through your S3 object to then move it onto the later technology. Still a huge feat to do that. And you probably need something a little bit more inquisitive than, a hyperscaler library. But there's a possibility of doing that. So I think it just comes back to that cost. And I don't see hyperscalers being overly worried about not having it backwardly compatible, because it's not intrinsically linked to the backup application anymore. And I think that's the key.
Because let's say that LTO 10 capacity is going to be 30 terabytes minimum. It's going to be more than this, as we know, but let's say it's 30 terabytes minimum. So when people, as a business, is looking at a tape library, once upon a time, they used to buy a tape library with 300-400 slots in order to get a high capacity.
Sure.
You know, even the small libraries today are like 24 slots. You know, with LTO 10, that's going to give you, nearly a petabyte?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, more than a petabyte.
Yeah.
Well, not quite, but almost a petabyte of data.
Yeah.
You know, so a petabyte of data in, what is it, 2U?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it's crazy. So, and the cost isn't that prohibitive to do that.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
In fact, you know, putting a petabyte onto a, you know, imagine having a 2U disk or SSD appliance that's giving you a petabyte, right? It'd be a lot more expensive than a tape.
Yeah, it is. And also what people tend to forget is, because it, as you mentioned, it's got the reliability, it's robust, it's easy to replace as well, isn't it? You know. And the other thing is, let's say you got a 24 slot library and it's a petabyte, let's say, then that library has infinite capacity, because you could take those 24 tapes out, put another 24 tapes in, and there's another petabyte.
That's a really good point. And the other thing as well, Ray, is that, you know, a lot of these libraries are expandable, right?
Yeah.
So you can add chassis to them. So you could be adding 2U chassis every year, every 5 years, whatever, to increase the size of that capacity. But there's an interesting point as well, because, you know, we've mentioned, you and I have been in this game for a long time.
Yeah.
Did you ever imagine, when you started out in this world, talking about a petabyte as if it were a megabyte back in 1993?
No, they were floppy disk when I started.
Yeah, amazing. So it just goes to show you.
1.44 meg, I think, is the capacity.
Yeah, I always say to people, a petabyte is not what it used to be.
No.
Right? And it's amazing the amount of organizations that have way over even 10 petabytes. I mean, huge. You know, the biggest library installed in the world has got 1.2 exabytes of data sat on that in a single library, which is just huge. So, you know, that's what's driven tape, and that's why it's still relevant today, is the capacity, the data capacity, or sorry, should I say, the amount of capacity that organizations store these days is, you know, beyond belief.
Yes.
You know, even 10 years ago, it's, you know, I can remember having a 1 petabyte opportunity 10 years ago was like, wow. You know, now we're talking 50 petabytes, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's astonishing. Absolutely astonishing.
That is. Thanks for coming in. Really
Always
appreciate
great to see you.
Yeah. You don't look any younger.
Oh, you're too kind, but that is not the truth. Is it? You can tell the grey hair is.
Don't worry, I'm going there as well. So.
Yeah.
No, I do want to go into the nitty gritty. Okay. I do want to go into the nitty gritty. I want to go into the nitty gritty. We're waiting for.
Do you want me to say 3, 2, 1?
We're thinking. Oh,
we're gonna be outtakes.
You were like, oh yeah, I remember now. I was like, okay. You didn't even hesitate.
No.
Open body language.